and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network, and today's topic is decision, and it's election day, so it's a day around decision. And actually, I know that lots of us have voted already, but I wanted to talk about what the mechanics of decision making are and how we go about making decisions and how to find alignment in those decisions for ourselves. So before we get started, let's just take a minute to get settled in and present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose, hold it, and imagine clean, crisp oxygen just flooding your lungs and flowing into your bloodstream and nourishing all your cells and bringing vitality and life to all your organs. And as you exhale, exhale any stress, any tension, maybe roll your shoulders. And let's take another deep breath in through your nose. This time, hold it and imagine sparkling white light just lighting up all the molecules and electrons, electrifying you and energizing you and bringing all kinds of life force into your body and being and beyond. And now let's just gently press our palms together. Feel your fingers against your palms, gently rub them together. Feel the tingling, the tickling, the sensation, and allow yourselves to bring yourself present to your body, to this moment right here, right now. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's great to be with you. And it's election day in the US. And I understand that this is a big deal, not only for us in the US, but for the world that's watching. So uh, it's a very, very interesting time, shall we say. So let's talk about decision, because we've all made decisions about all kinds of things in addition to the election, obviously. And how do we go about making those decisions? How do we decide to do something uh, or to think something? I think that this is an important thing to untangle. We all have different decision-making strategies, but it's a great thing to untangle to see how you make decisions. So when I make a decision about something, and I don't think I'm alone in this, a lot of us want to think that we're rational, right? That we're making a reasoned decision, that um, we're weighing all the options. And I don't know if that's really necessarily true, because I think, I know for me that I will often make a decision based on a feeling. And I tend to trust those feelings, I think, more than all the intellectual machinations that I might go through in trying to make a determination. So let's see. I can think about this. Maybe we can investigate this a little bit just in a personal example. So I've told you guys that I have started playing with encaustic painting, which is really exciting to me. It's creative. And I have a fine arts background, and I haven't really done a whole lot of just purely creative work in terms of artistic kind of stuff for a long time. So in in considering doing encaustic, I've been wanting to do it for a long time. The materials to do it, the equipment and such, was an expense. And so I got to decide, I got to weigh whether I was going to do this or not, like which supplies I was going to invest in, and which equipment, et cetera, et cetera. And so in thinking about the choice, the decision to actually do it, I thought about it for a while. I waited for a while. I looked at the finances a little bit to say, well, can I really, can I justify this? And ultimately, I think I just said, this is something that I really desire for myself. So it was based on my degree of desire. And then, so I really think that lots of us make decisions based on feelings, and then we find the facts to justify our decision. And so if we, hello, Hope, welcome, welcome. Good afternoon to you. So glad you're here. I'd be curious to know what kind of decision-making strategy you have, if you're aware of it, Hope. I know for me, I really just, I with these art supplies, for instance, hello from Holland. Carol, I haven't seen you here before. Welcome. Great to have you here. We're talking about decision and how we make decisions. And I was just saying that I think in a lot of ways we make decisions based on a gut feeling, and then we find justification for the decision that we've made. And I see that, like, with these art supplies, I had, there was an expense, I get to look at it, and Hope says, I go with my guts. I think that that's probably what most of us do, and then justify it. So hello, Isabel, welcome. It's great to have you here. We're talking about decision, and Hope says she goes with her gut, and I do too, I think. And then I find justification to make my decision okay, in a way. So, you know, I decided I'm going to do this art thing. Then I get to decide which supplies I wanted. And there was since encaustic is wax, it's painting with wax, there was a hot stylus pen that was more expensive than I would have wanted to pay for something. And I really wanted it. And it just took me about a week to get to a point where I was willing to give that to myself. So I already knew I wanted it. I probably knew I was going to get it at some point. And the justification was how I would use it, you know, like, because the question I asked, well, are you really going to use this thing? And so to justify it, I came up with, yes, I'm going to use it. I started drawing a little bit more, which gave me more justification to get this stylus, this hot stylus that I could draw with the wax. So it's really interesting to see how we make these decisions and then go through all machinations. Like, I'd already decided to get the pen, and then it was just a matter of waiting until I had enough justification lined up to be able to take the plunge, right? It's pretty funny if we look at it. And so I wonder, like, in other situations, how we're making decisions based on, we want to think we're rational people, right? But the thing that I've heard about is bias, bias confirmation, I think it's called. So let's say I have a an idea. I'm just thinking of what, like, okay, so I really believe that sustainability is important, that being alert to our consumption is an important thing, right? So that conviction for me resides in a deep emotional gut response. And then I have that deep feeling, and then I find all kinds of information to justify and validate that feeling and my behavior around that feeling. Now, I do believe that with all my heart and soul, that we have a responsibility to be conscious of our consumption and to minimize our footprint and ultimately see if we can create a positive impact. And it's first a deeply emotional thing for me, and then I find the validation for that and the support for that and the ways to move forward with that. And Hope says buyer's remorse. I think that's what you're saying, buyer's remorse around um, justifying our purchases. For example, our decisions to buy something, we justify them so that we don't have buyer's remorse ultimately. And Carol says, most of the time I know I want something, I go and try to make money free for it, but usually I can't, so I don't get it. Well, so that, I've been there too, Carol, for sure, to be in a position to say, I would like that, and I don't have the funds for that now, or I don't want to allocate the funds to that right now. Or if it's something that you really, really, really want, the likelihood is that you'll find a way to make that happen. And it may not happen immediately, but if it's something that's a really driving force for you, the likelihood is that all of us will make it happen. And Carol says, my kids always go first. So, Carol, that's a beautiful thing. And I invite you to include yourself in the mix with your kids, because um, what will happen in your decision making is that you're probably saying, you know what, this is not as important to me as this is for the as giving to them is important to me. So you're creating a new priority. However, um, as long as it's not something frivolous, if it's something that you really desire, um, and I mean authentically desire, then it's worthy of your consideration to include you in the mix so that there's not a potential resentment for the things that you've sacrificed. Because when we sacrifice in the name of other people, if that goes on long enough, and if those people don't show the gratitude or whatever appreciation that we're expecting, whether consciously or not, it can build resentment and a sense of loss and a feeling of sacrifice and a feeling of victimhood. And none of those things, we don't want to be nurturing feelings of victimhood, and we don't want to be nurturing feelings of victimhood with sacrifice. Sometimes the choice to sacrifice something that we desire can be an enriching, empowering thing to say, I'm pleased to sacrifice this for that. But we get to really look at our motivations, because ultimately we don't want to be projecting resentment to others, right? So it's a delicate balance, Carol, for sure, to say, I love my kids. I choose to provide for them first, and you still get to be in the picture. It's important. And Carol says, you're so right. I'm working on it. My husband is helping me with it. Yeah. So if you're always giving to your kids and your kids come first all the time, if you are getting more and more depleted in the process, then you're not really able to give to your kids in the way that you desire. And I'll tell you, from growing up with my dad, who was very generous with money for me, he was not as generous with his time, and I wanted his time more than I wanted his money. And so there may be ways for you to be present with your kids that that is enriching for them even more than you already are somehow, that feels like a gift to you and to them, and then you get to be included in the in in the equation. We'll just say it that way, because it's, if you don't find nurturing in your day to day, if you're always sacrificing, then it comes to a point where you're depleted and there's not enough left for them, and there's not enough left for you, meaning you of you. So good for you, Carol, to be gaining some willingness to include yourself in the mix and to realize that you're worthy of that care and attention. So decision making, when let's think of other situations where we make decisions. So we're making decisions all the time. We're making buying decisions. Let's say we go to the grocery store. How do you decide to buy one brand over the other? I'm wondering. So Hope says, we need to find a happy medium. I used to be like that with my children, but now we have the right balance. Yes, it takes a deliberate effort to create that balance. And Carol says, yes, I've dealt with burnouts in the past. I don't want to go back to that. Right. So self-care and self-nurturing is really, really important. In fact, this is something that I'm contending with too in my own life, to create some kind of balance that's nurturing with me, in my family. And I think I've said this before. Whenever my dad has passed, but whenever I would tell him what I was doing, um, or people I had met or things I was doing, he said, well, are you making money at it, or can you make money at it? And everything was valued based on how much money I could make with it. And usually most of the things that I was doing had nothing to do with making money at all. So it's interesting for me to be looking at how I apportion my time. And it's not that every endeavor that I'm doing is money making, but many of the endeavors that I do, that I spend my time on, not the encaustic painting, but the other things that I do with my time are about um, outreach, or like building Sustainability Now, which is the podcast that is related to sustainability. So it's mission driven for me, So I'm doing stuff around that, or I'm doing stuff around um, expanding my business, or I'm doing stuff um, that's quote unquote productive. And I've been working with my clients a lot to assist them in decoupling their self-worth from their output in the world, their productivity. Because when I tie my output to my self-worth, if I don't produce a lot, then what does that do for my self-esteem? Then I get to put myself down and brutalize myself. And the fact is that um, we value, we by valuing ourselves based on externalities like output, we kind of disempower and disenfranchise ourselves as human beings that just get to be here to experience being alive and life. And so if I value, for instance, in terms of output, if I value, let's say, creating a course more than I value doing encaustic painting that, feeds my soul on a certain level, then if I don't do the course, if I don't develop the course and I do the encaustic painting, and that's how I'm valuing myself, I may be doing the encaustic painting and feeling inadequate and insecure, or uh, unworthy, because I haven't done these other things that the world would consider output. So I am encouraging people to decouple this self-worth and external productivity and achievement. The self-worth comes from a sense of presence and being, right? From being present to life, being present to the wonder, and then the doing stuff comes out of this place of inspiration. It's not that the doing stops necessarily, but more that it is a um, a side effect of the beingness that we are. It's kind of turning things upside down. But anyway, what I've noticed in terms of my schedule is that I deliberately set up my schedule so that I would have free time. And what I noticed was over the past several weeks, as I was trying to implement this, I noticed that I would fill that free time with stuff. Instead of just being able to go for a walk, I would fill it with other obligations and responsibilities that were more oriented to productivity, quote unquote, or doing stuff, like I'd fill my time with commitments to other people. And so I think in a way, Carol, that kind of goes back to what you're saying, and hope that it's all finding a balance where you're giving, or doing for others and not really taking the time to just be, like unscheduled playtime or scheduled playtime even. Maybe that's the way to be looking at it, is creating scheduled playtime. And what I saw is that there were all these things I wanted to do, and I was scheduling all those things in without acknowledging how important it was for me to have the time for me. So I wonder, for you guys, are you putting in time for you? Even if it's funny, because I was talking with another one of my clients yesterday, and they said they had done the same thing. Like they got into all these things where everything else was more important than drumming. This is something that this person grew up doing, as a foundation of their joyful expression, and yet they just didn't make time for it in their schedule. And so we came up with, well, hey, you meditate, you do all these other practices, why not take that time to do that drumming that really brings your soul back into balance, right? So then when they do that, then they can come back to all the other things and all the other responsibilities and all the other people enriched and revitalized. So what is it that brings us back into a place of our connection with ourselves, and how important are we willing to make that? How can we decide to make that a priority? What will it look like to make that decision? And look at the decisions that we make ongoingly, like these decisions to fill up all that time with other things on my calendar. I was i was i was deciding to do that, but I wasn't really conscious about the driver behind that decision. It's like, oh, I want to do so much. Well, I also want to have the experience of me time. Like I really need that. I really need that. And I think if I give myself more of that me time, then I won't just sort of slide into the weekend like a puddle, and giving myself that me time is not just a self-indulgence, but it is an essential. And okay, so we're talking about decisions. When I recognize, when I acknowledge that that me time is an essential thing, then there I've already got the gut inclination that's wanting to make that decision, but it's the definition of the me time that gives me justification to do it. Right. So how about you? Are you finding, like, do you have to validate your gut decisions, or do you just go with your gut? Sometimes I'm not getting enough information from my gut to just let me choose to follow it. Um, so then I go and find my justifications uh, to honor that inner impulse. I'm listening more and more. It's just sometimes the volume needs adjusting so that I can hear it a little bit better. So, what other kinds of decisions or decision making strategies? So we think a thought, maybe we feel into it, we have an internal conversation. How does that work for you when you think about the last decision you made? Um, what are the things that weigh on your decisions, and how much influence do other people's opinions have on your decision? How much influence do other people's opinions have on your decision? So, for instance, I can remember family gatherings that I really didn't want to go to, and I chose to go because of other people's feelings, how other people would react if I didn't. And so I chose to go instead of not going because I the responses of these other people were more important than my not going, for instance. So how much influence do other people's feelings and thoughts and opinions have on your decision making? And and when you make those decisions in deference to others, do you give yourself the gift of aligning with actually making that choice? So, for instance, in this family gathering scenario where I chose to go, I chose to go, saying, okay, well, I know these people would be upset if I didn't, so I'm going to go. And then I choose to be there. I don't go begrudgingly. I actually choose. But if I went begrudgingly, that's another situation where we would be headed toward burnout and upset and resentment, right? Because we're not fully aligned with our decision. We made a decision, but we really wanted to do something else, and we haven't made the complete and aligned choice to do what we've elected to do. So I wonder if you can also sort of tease apart these decisions, because we tend to say we've made good decisions, we've made bad decisions, and my inclination is to say that if we're in alignment, there is no bad decision. The determination of bad decision comes from a 2020 hindsight kind of thing. But if we are conscious and in alignment in our decision, then we're making the best decision we can make at that moment. And or sometimes we know that we're making a bad decision. Sometimes we know better and we choose to make that decision anyway. And in that case, then we're choosing. And so we get to be in alignment with that choice, even if we know that there might be a better decision for us. Once we choose it, that is the decision. There is no better decision. That's the one we made, right? So we get to be in alignment with that decision and whatever consequences it brings. Does that make sense? So I think I think the this whole conversation about decision making is an important thing, And especially when we make decisions that impact others, and um, maybe on some level, all our decisions impact others too. I don't know. Uh, I think if you can tease it apart to see if you feel like you don't make the best decisions, if you can tease it apart to see how you make decisions and what you're basing those decisions on, then you can maybe have more deliberate input and choice and influence in those actual decisions. So, anyway, that is today's topic. And if you're in the US and if you haven't yet voted, please, please, please go and exercise your privilege to vote. And whatever the outcome of the election, it it is a privilege to vote that has been fought for and died for, and not to be taken for granted. And with that, I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page every weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And please check out the other programming on Enlightened World Network. And with lots and lots of love to you, I hope to see you again here really soon.